Hi there, I'm Swan. If you've seen anything about KATSUCON this year, you might have unfortunately seen a post like this about it. It has been a long and eventful weekend. Let's get into it. Since I travel to so many conventions for a living, I decided to start making vlogs this year. And boy, what a year to start documenting. So let's start with setup day, Thursday. I was so excited because this was my very first KATSUCON, and I had only heard good things about it. I didn't know what to expect from it aside from the fact that it was taking place in a venue I had been to twice before, the Gaylord National Resort and Convention Center. Thankfully, this meant that I knew where the loading dock was located, which was all the way down here at the end of National Harbor Boulevard. KATSUCON staff directed me to park temporarily on the side of the road so that I could check in and get a loading pass because I would not be allowed into the loading dock without one. To keep warm, I jogged through the cold all the way through the loading dock, through the back of Hall E, and up to the front of Hall D, which was where the Artist Alley staff table was located. Checked in, grabbed my badge, ran all the way back, and was able to successfully unload all of my merchandise at my table, where there was a tiny bag of candy waiting that was given by the staff to everyone. During all of this, I did notice that there was a pipe dripping and a trash can set up to catch the liquid here. It was dripping the entire time we were setting up. Setup hours ran from 5 p.m. to midnight, but we decided to grab dinner and put off setup to the morning. Afterward, my helper and I checked in at the hotel, and we had some unexpected guests. How's it going there, George? Abe? Why? Abe is going to keep us honest by watching over both of our beds all weekend. We decided to stay at the Holiday Inn Express for a few reasons, most of them having to do with cost, and since we're talking about it, I might as well give my thoughts on the experience with old George and Abe. In general, if I were to rate a hotel based on comfort, the scale would start from Survivalist, where you saw the movie Hostel and thought to yourself, nah, I'd win. Those guys are scrubs. The other end of the scale would be Bougie, where you would spit on the poor, but that would require you to be in the same space as them. Ideally, I'd like my hotel to be somewhere in the middle, because when purchasing most things, I like to abide by a general rule of don't buy the cheapest thing because you don't know what they're doing to cut costs, and don't buy the most expensive thing because you don't know what they're doing to justify the markup. Since I like to keep costs down while enjoying a modicum of comfort, I like to stay within this range if possible. I'd say the Holiday Inn Express fit that pretty okay. The beds were decently comfortable, the room was clean, and had housekeeping every day. There was a microwave and a mini fridge, and they had a free full breakfast complete with waffles, pancakes, toast, mini muffins, yogurt, eggs, sausage patties, cereal, juice, bananas, apples, etc. What you might normally expect from an included continental breakfast. However, the heating unit was loud whenever it kicked on. The plug outlets were loose, and while it worked fine the first night, the shower water could only heat up to room temperature at the hottest during the rest of our stay. So after a full night's rest, actually I woke up at 3:08 a.m. and couldn't fall back asleep, and indulging in breakfast, we set out for the convention. Now, let's talk about the parking situation. There's a lot of it around the venue, and it increased in price this year! Yay! If you're not staying at the Gaylord or Hampton, it's $34 at St. George Garage and $43 for self-parking per day. There are hourly rates, but as an artist, you're gonna be there all day. Personally, I liked parking at St. George because it's a close walk, and I saved a little money. But if you guys have more tips on how to save on parking at this venue, please let me know. Setup on Friday opened at 8 a.m. and the hall opened to VIPs at 11:30 a.m. The general attendees at noon, and closed at 8 p.m. It's hard to predict what days will be busy at a convention, but generally speaking, Fridays tend to be slower days for me, so I wasn't expecting much on this day. Boy, was I wrong. This convention was packed all weekend long. There were definitely peak busy times and slower times, but for the most part, this was one of those conventions where you could gauge how busy it was by how long it took for you to get back to your booth if you got up to go use the bathroom. Business was great, but the phone signal was awful. I had never had this happen when I was here for MagFest in 2023 and 2024, but this year the signal was so bad that I lost some sales because the transactions sometimes just didn't go through. I debated purchasing the Wi-Fi, but it cost over $400. If I were to roughly gauge how many sales I lost due to the spotty signal, it was about less than $150, so I could factor that into my shrinkage margin. Now let's return to that pipe, because this is where it becomes relevant again. It had stopped dripping on Friday, and the trash can had been cleared, so the only evidence that it had been dripping was a faint stain on the floor. A little after 6 p.m. on Friday, the hall filled with the sound of rushing water. The pipe had burst. Thankfully, some tables, like John Vincent Salvino, reacted quickly and moved their table immediately to save it however they could. Unfortunately, there were other tables like Huasuan, who had a 2-table corner display filled with prints that could not be moved as swiftly. Artists and attendees jumped in to help dismantle the display as quickly as possible to save whatever they could. The damage was done. The hall filled very quickly with what I could only describe as a humid, musty, almost sewage-like smell. Getting water on a print was bad enough, but getting that on your merchandise was practically a death sentence for the item. It was rancid and a health hazard. The convention staff evacuated all of the attendees out of the hall fairly quickly, and eventually a large trash bin was placed underneath a pipe to catch the water. But Huasuan's booth was in shambles, and everyone was in shock over what to do. No one knew what would happen to the artist alley. We could only hope that they would be able to shut off the leak and clean up the hall, which is exactly what they set about doing. Artists were encouraged to pack up their items and move them off of the floor. Anything that could be affected by the water or the smell was encouraged to be taken out of the hall, if possible. Otherwise, the displays were probably safe to leave in the hall. So that's what we did, leaving the hall in uncertainty as to what would happen the next day. The convention staff was in contact with us until after 11 p.m. that night to keep us updated, and also messaged us throughout the morning. It was clear that they were dedicated to alleviating the situation as much as possible. The official communication from the Gaylord to KATSUCON was that the pipe spilled gray water from the dishwashers in the Gaylord's kitchen. So this instead of this. The incident was so shocking that it even made the local news. I highly encourage people to go support the artists affected by the spill. From what I could see, Huasuan and Obelisk were the tables closest to the pipe. I'll include links to their pages and also nearby tables in the description to this video, so please go show them your support. Okay, so the next morning, the staff and artists were allowed back into the hall at 9 a.m. Staff provided PPE, cleaning equipment, and whatever the artists needed to take care of themselves and their booths. As for the spill, it was mostly cleaned up by the time we arrived. The pipe had stopped leaking, and there was even a caution wet floor sign. I myself bought sanitizing spray to spray down my booth, and one of the artists was going around giving out dryer sheets to keep out the odor, which was so smart. My booth smelled like clean laundry for the rest of the day. The Artist Alley staff also went around to each booth to explain what happened and receive any damage assessments from artists. They were also passing out these ribbons, which I would later find out ribbons are a big thing at this convention. More on that later. The affected artists were relocated to the front of the hall up here. It opened around noon for VIPs, and attendees started showing up around 1 p.m. The hall hours were extended until 9 p.m., which I was skeptical about because in all of my previous conventions, business would die down to a crawl by 7 or 8 p.m. Not KATSUCON though. I don't know if it was because of the pipe incident or if it's just normally like this, but people were crowding the Artist Alley hall all day, from open to close. After the hall closed, we hurried on over to the live auction because I had actually submitted a pen and ink piece to the art show. It was my second time participating in an art show. The first time was at Anime Central many years ago, where I submitted a My Love Story print, but this time I made a traditional piece for it. It was missing from the show by the end of the day, meaning it had either been sold or made it to live auction, so I was pretty excited. Apparently only 2 pieces this year made it to live auction, and they were both not mine. It was 2 sets of beautiful enamel pins, and it was pretty fun getting to watch people bid on the items. I would definitely love to participate again, maybe with an even better piece. My piece ended up being sold at the art show for $33, which after KATSUCON took their percentage, I took home $31.35 on Sunday, which I immediately spent on my fellow artists. I can't help it. Y'all make such good stuff. We closed out Saturday evening by maybe sneaking a Five Guys meal into the movie theater to watch Love Hurts. A fun Valentine's action rom-com that is exactly what you'd expect from this type of movie. Then at the hotel room, we enjoyed these cute heart-shaped Boston cream donuts from Dunkin'. I didn't even know they were heart-shaped when I ordered them. I was so happy. Finally, Sunday arrived, and it was a relatively easy and short day. The hours were 10 a.m. to 3 p.m., and even despite the shorter hours, people still showed up to shop. I met someone who came by with this huge amalgamation of ribbons attached to their badge. Apparently, he hosted a ribbon meetup, and one of the people there had enough ribbons to make a whole pair of pants out of them. Note to self, bring ribbons for people if I get into KATSUCON again. Breaking down the table was straightforward. I got my loading dock pass, brought the car to the dock, and battled wind and rain to get my stuff to the car. By the time we were done, the rain had settled, and we were greeted by a rainbow as we drove away from the convention. It was the perfect ending to a crazy weekend. So, how did I do? As someone who has never gotten into events as huge as Anime Expo or Comic-Con, this convention was one of my most profitable ones. My table is a mixture of pixel art and illustration, so it can be a toss-up as to how well I do at any given event. So I'm thrilled with this result. I was extremely fortunate to be one of the artists who wasn't directly affected by the spill, aside from the odor and our selling hours being cut by an hour and a half early on Friday. If the venue compensates the affected artists properly and takes action to make sure this doesn't happen again, I'd happily come here again. And that's basically my experience at KATSUCON. I'm sure there are tons more stories about the event from other artists and attendees, so my experiences are certainly not the end-all be-all of the event. I was lucky that I was able to walk away with an overall positive experience, but I can't say the same for everyone. I hope everyone was able to get home safely and recover. Did any of you guys go to KATSUCON this year? Do you have your own convention horror stories? Also, if you want to see me make more videos like this, let me know in the comments, and I'll see you next time.